So a lot can be learned being an artist and traveling and trying to explore the world. So today I just want to briefly touch upon my time that I spent when I was living in New York, going out there, especially being someone like me. I don't know if a lot of you guys know my story. Most likely nobody knows my story because I've never really taken the time to sit and start telling my story. So I wanted today to just speak on the whole idea, the whole meta that I was able to learn while being out on the East Coast. So originally, I'm from Vancouver, BC. I grew up there. I was born in the Congo, and then immigrated to Montreal first, and then eventually went on to grow up in beautiful British Columbia. Originally in a city known as Abbotsford, which is about 45 minutes away from Vancouver. So it's like the suburbs and everything. So before we get into what the time I spent doing in New York was, I want to briefly touch upon my whole entire upbringing and how everything was. So I was always a really rambunctious kid. I was always somebody who was always thinking on a new type of wavelength, always thinking about how to take ideas and sort of like extrapolate on them, take ideas and then bring them into fruition. So a lot of the people growing up, especially where I'm from, was a really like small town, farm country type of vibe. So a lot of those people growing up never really understood anything that I was trying to do, anything that I was trying to accomplish. So eventually at 19, I decided to move away from there and to move to Vancouver. So when I was there in Vancouver, I was able to just kind of get a sense of how everything was moving. Because when I moved originally to Vancouver, because I don't want this video to be about my hometown. I'll make a whole separate video about my hometown and how everything kind of like was the melting pot for essentially making me the type of person I am today. But I just want to kind of just give you some context as to why I decided to pack up my bags and move to New York. So everything in Vancouver when I was there, I was a music producer. I was learning the game of music production, producing music and trying to find artists to hop on beats and everything. So eventually that wasn't really giving anything. There wasn't really much opportunity there. I didn't like the process of chasing down artists because what I was finding essentially was like no one had the kind of hustle and motivation that I had to really make things come to fruition. So luckily enough though, I was able to, through a friend of mine, Jonathan, I was able to meet another friend named Jonathan, and we ended up banding together and just really just working on art all the time. We would just work on art 24 hours a day from the moment we woke up to the end of until the next morning, essentially, like 6 a.m., 7 a.m., we would just work on art. So what we ended up finding out was like, no one had our drive. No one had that fire that burnt inside of them to take their art to where they wanted it to be. So one day we kind of just decided that like we had to see what else was out there. We had to see what the other side of the world was. And you know how America has always been, I guess, the melting pot of intense competition. It's always been the pinnacle of testing yourself and putting yourself through situations. And everybody knows if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. So we took a 4-day Greyhound across Canada to get into the United States with nothing more than just laptops, all our music equipment, speakers, and things like that. And we decided just to venture into New York and see what we could realistically make of ourselves. And being in New York was one of the most eye-opening situations that I've ever put myself in life. And I urge a lot of artists to get outside of their comfort zone, outside of their hometowns, and venture to a place where you don't know anybody, you have no support system, you have nothing that can bail you out. Because once a man puts himself in a situation where he knows that it's only his own efforts that are going to get him out of any kind of situation that comes up, you realize what you're actually capable of. When they say pressure makes diamonds, these kind of antropes and these kind of like metaphors aren't things just thrown out of thin air. These are like realistic things that actually occur. Yes, I understand that carbon is pressurized to make diamonds, and that's essentially what's happening to your molecules as you are doing things that are at a high level. The carbon that is within you, which is you of a man, is being pressurized and you're being put to the test. We didn't have much money. All we had was our artistic ability and our know-how. And we had linked a couple of people through Twitter, and these were the people that were kind of navigating us through New York, kind of like the poetic scene. Because I think we were hanging out with this girl who was a poet, and she was a couple years older than us. I think she was like 32 or like 35 or something, and we were like, this is when I was like 22 at the time, so we were just super young. But she was essentially showing us how like the whole poet scene, I guess the poem scene, the artistic poet scene in New York was functioning. Like these artists would host their own events. They would get liquor and sell it. They would have tickets at the door, some of these events. So we kind of just got to see the entire commodization of art. The idea of taking your art and turning it into a viable selling business. Because a lot of the things when I was in Vancouver, there wasn't anybody really doing that in the sense of like taking your art and being able to actually monetize it and make money from it. So a lot of the things that I learned while I was in New York was the art of monetization, the art of taking your art and monetizing it. So these people in New York just had a different mindset. It was so business oriented, everything that they were doing. Everything that they were showing us was just like, every single day was like a new chapter that I was like learning. I was just soaking up so much knowledge at the time that at some points it just felt too much to be, because it's one thing to experience something, but it's also one thing to experience something, learn, and then grasp that information to then be able to use it for yourself. Because when we had moved there, there wasn't a thought in my mind that I was ever going to leave it. Because for me, leaving my hometown and venturing out was one of the greatest things that I ever could have experienced. And it was one of those things that like, I knew that once I left my hometown, there was no way in hell I would ever try to go back. Because like, there's just something about being in a place where you're misunderstood and then going to another place where it's filled with nothing but weirdos, where you kind of just get the sense of like, okay, this is home. This is where I belong. I belong amongst these weirdos. I belong amongst these people that are absolute misfits. And that is essentially the place where I fell in love with. Everything that I was learning there was just leaps and bounds ahead of anything that was going on in Vancouver. Just the speed of movement and how things were maneuvering was it's just a speed you can't really, it's like living your whole life with ankle weights on and then finally one day just taking the ankle weights off. You know, like you've been walking while everybody else is running. So essentially like living on the West Coast was like walking around with ankle weights. And then moving to the East Coast was like taking those ankle weights off and now everyone's just running. Like it's like the speed of New York is at the speed of which like no one even stops for crosswalks. Like the crosswalk sign when it says stop doesn't mean anything to people in New York. They're still walking. They're still going to where they need to go. Like the speed it's like a freaking locomotive. The way it moves, it's just like chugga 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 chugga. It's literally moving to the speed of money. It's literally moving to the speed of money. It's like growing up, I always had this fire that burned inside of me, and like I always knew that like I was capable of doing things that are outside of my reach and realm. And I knew once I got to New York that something unlocked inside of me. This new way of doing things. Finally, I realized that like, yo, I'm in a place where people understand the speed in which I want to move. I'm in a place where people understand everything that I'm trying to do. So like, it was fantastic. It was like something that I'm telling you, like every artist should get the opportunity to leave where they're from and to just venture out into a place where there's nothing that's going to save you. And being able to be in this place really taught me the essentially the basis of that whole trip was just to learn that like, yo, when you want to do something, it's only you. Like there's no one that's going to come save you from anything. Like it's your own efforts that you need to put forth that are going to get you where you need to go. So in New York, it was fantastic. It was just like I can't reiterate it enough how amazing it was. We were living with this guy named Hiram. We were living on his couch, in his living room actually, and sleeping on his couch, and we were just hustling and bustling. We would go to different ghettos, we would go to different hoods, and when I say the ghetto, we would go to the Bronx. We would like venture out to the Bronx to try to find artists that were just like talented that we could record, make beats for, and just literally try to come up on that level and try to like and make a name for ourselves. Like we essentially went out there with no concrete plan. Like I had no plan as to be like, okay, I'm going to get to New York, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. No, it was just more of like, okay, we're going somewhere where we know we're going to be tested at every single moment. And there was no money coming in. We kind of just had like, we would call family and friends to kind of send us a little bit of money so we could eat that day or make a couple moves. But he said, like, we were living on Hiram's couch and we were making all these moves, and I could feel the resentment of Hiram just slowly building and building and building. Because it's one thing when, and this is something that you will experience as an artist all the time. It's one thing when you're doing something and you're getting a lot of traction and motion and momentum, and other people are staying stagnant. There's a resentment that starts to build amongst people when you start to do things that are showing that you're taking so much action. When you take so much action and other people around you are not taking action, it builds resentment amongst people. And this is something I was feeling throughout the whole process. So with our time in New York, we're decided that, like, yo, we can't live on Hiram's couch anymore. Like, this man is a nuisance. This man is just like, he's unpredictable. He would cause disturbances in the building that would then cause like repercussions that was just putting our entire livelihood and all of our music equipment at jeopardy. Like, this one time, he beat up some kid in the elevator, and that kid's brothers came and started knocking on the door, trying to take the door down. And Hiram chased these kids out with these machetes outside the door, like on some Mortal Kombat shit. So me and Jonathan just knew at one point, we're like, yo, we cannot stay here. So we put all of our brain power together and managed to find this, this art studio in Queens. And this art studio in Queens, when we signed the lease, we convinced them that we were like these artists that had this money, because the area in Queens, it wasn't like some broke area. It was a pretty posh area. It was right beside Silver Cup Studios, actually, like the movie studio where they shoot a lot of stuff in New York. So it was a pretty like upscale area. So we moved all our music equipment stuff there. We found this. What do you call those things? Those futons. We found a futon near this laundromat in this basement, and we took it. It was I convinced the guy to like let us have it, and we moved it literally across, like, I think it was like 4 or 5 blocks. Me and Jonathan just carrying this futon across, and then finally getting it to Queens and into our apartment. And at the time, they were shooting this movie right in front of our building, and we were moving this futon across this movie set while they were filming it. Obviously, they stopped the production, but it was just funny to see like these 2 kids moving this futon across this whole movie set just to get into our building and put our stuff there. And this whole process, it just really taught me of like, as you're going to try to progress and you're going to elevate yourself through your artistic endeavors, people are always going to try to stop you, because when you're having traction and people aren't having traction, it shows to them that they aren't doing shit. They aren't doing anything. They're not making anything happen with their lives. They're just doing the same old, waking up, taking the shit and eating, and it's redundant. So when you're taking so much action and making things happen in your life, it really puts people at a dis-ease, you know? And throughout this, even when we got the place in Queens, Hiram wasn't even happy for us, dude. Like, the man wasn't even happy. Like, he was fully, like, in a full, like, he tried to, like, shrug it off and play it off like, oh, okay, great, you guys got this. You know, the whole time it was just, like, shade. But I guess the whole conclusion of this whole story is just to let you know that, like, there's always going to be people trying to stop the things that you're doing and try to stop you from achieving these goals, whether they outrightly say it or not. It's all from their actions. It's all from the things that they're going to be either saying or not saying, and you have to be able to just brush that off and know that where you're going is fantastic. And to end the story, unfortunately, the biggest part of my ego did not want to go back home. But being in New York, living day to day, not making any income, it was detrimental because we didn't have enough money eventually to stay in New York. There was at one point we had to decide, do we pay one more month of rent or do we take this money to buy plane tickets to go back home? And unfortunately, we had to go back home because the winter was coming and we didn't know if we could really make it through a New York winter with what we had. So we decided to go home. But on that note, going back home also was in a sense, it was so defeatist. It was so defeatist. I felt so defeated. I felt that like my entire world was crashing down on me, and I felt that like there wasn't anything that I could ever come back from that loss. Like at that time, to me, that was the biggest loss I had ever incurred, was coming back from New York with my tail between my legs. But after about like a month or so, I realized while me and Jonathan were staying in his dad's basement, I realized that like, yo, our entire time in New York taught us so much. It gave us so much knowledge. Like all that knowledge that we had, it was time to put it to use. So now that we were back in Vancouver and back amongst the people walking with ankle weights, we realized that we were moving at such a Naruto speed. We were moving so quickly, dude. Our shurungen was so elevated compared to everybody else around us. So we took all that mental energy and all that hustle that we saw in New York and we applied it. We started an art collective and we started doing underground art shows for other up and coming artists. What we would do is we would rent the space, get a bunch of different artists that wanted to display their art, and we would split the cost of the venue with these artists. And then the way to actually make money is we would charge. At first we were just selling liquor to make money. Then eventually we started getting into tickets for the door. But through all my ability of gift and gab and being able to wheel and deal and make deals, I was able to find somebody when I was on set doing extra work that had this event company where it was through this app. So if we use their application as like the ticket provider, they would pay for all the attendees and people could get into our event for free just for the fact I guess they were doing promotion for their app. So everybody who came out the door with this application, they were allowed into the event for free. So this brand was also marketing their entire company through this kind of promotion. So it was a deal I was able to make it so that our event still stayed free, but we were then able to generate income over top of that. So the ingenuity and the ability to think on your feet and create things out of thin air are so capable. And when you want to achieve something that is outside of your thought processes, I'm telling you, when you put yourself fully into that, you will be able to materialize things in a way that you never thought possible. And ever since that was the first stepping stone and the first kind of like trajectory outside of this low that I had, which I thought I was like, for me, I was like so depressed thinking that nothing would ever come out of it. But like the highs that we were able to reach with this art collective was something I didn't even imagine in itself. At its peak, the company, we were able to start doing shows with Lululemon and start displaying art in like at a higher level artists started working with us. And at the peak, at the event, we were actually getting interviewed. We were getting interviewed by some local publications and also like local media. So it goes to show you how like one thing hitting a low can actually then springboard something else hitting a high. So unfortunately, I'm not a people person. I don't like the whole entire sense of like limelight and being in front of people like that. So I was never one to indulge in the whole interviewing and things like that. But I kind of like taking more of a background, I guess, like role to everything. So through the process of this art collective, I was able to then springboard the idea of a record label. But the story of the record label is a story for another video. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video. If you watch this video all the way to the end, thank you very much. My name is xCephasx, and I will continue to tell my story and help up and coming artists get through that depression, get through that anxiety, get through this will, because I know you guys have the will to become the greatest things that you guys want to become. Peace.